World War III, to be or not to be? That is a question on many people's minds right now. There is a collective sense of instability in the field with the war drums beating and AI fear out there, as well as just the general polarization that seems to be ramping up with every year, month, even day that passes. So we are at a collective choice point right now. This is not just geopolitically, this is consciously. We are at a choice point. The way I perceive it is we have already been in the midst of World War III. It is a war on consciousness, on spirituality, on even humanity itself, on our souls. So, we are going to get deeper into this subject in this episode. If you're new here, welcome or welcome back to the Heart of Truth podcast. I'm your host, Amanda. And we're going to get into the idea of timeline bifurcation, the split in consciousness, what this really means, and how this might actually play out, not just as a theory, but as an energetic reality. And the way that I perceive it is we all have the choice to choose the higher timeline. So I'm going to discuss this through the lens of astrology. We have a really potent transit coming up on July 7th. The Middle East conflicts, AI, the New York City Democratic mayor nominee coming into the field and how that connects with Atlas Shrugged. So I'm going to touch on that. The true criminals, the way I see it, and also the lessons that I learned from my own cancer journey, how I actually healed. And how I feel that is really relevant to what we're experiencing collectively right now. So let's get into it. So, to anchor it in with the astrology first, to understand the collective energies that are working through us and with us, and whether we see the tropical astrology as part of the matrix reality, I feel that it is super important to understand what the planets are reflecting to us from the matrix perspective. So we have one of the biggest transits of our lifetime coming up on July 7th because of what this historically has brought in. So we have Uranus entering Gemini. So this is happening for the first time in 84 years. And what this transit brings is that it historically coincides with periods of significant societal shifts, technological advancements, and revolutionary change. And often that revolutionary change comes with war, comes with conflict. So the last time we had this transit, it was 1942 through 1949. So what were we experiencing globally then? We were in the midst of World War II, the Holocaust, of course. It was the start of the Cold War, and it was also the birth of the nuclear age. So that's some heavy energy, but we also saw the invention of the computer, the rise of TV, and mass media. So there is this energy of both conflict and innovation that comes through, as well as disruption of norms. Now, if we go back even further, the previous time this transit occurred, it was 1861 to 1869, we experienced the American Civil War. Going back one further, 1774 to 1782, which of course was the American Revolutionary War. So, the American War of Independence. So, a lot of upheaval, birth of a new nation in there, the ending of slavery. So we have a lot of really intense energies that come through this transit. It is revolutionary change, technological advancements, communication and sharing of information tends to be part of what changes here. But there's also this deeper questioning of established norms and structures and beliefs and ways of thinking. So there is a shadow side to this transit, which comes in the form of that conflict, but there's also a very revolutionary light side to it that brings a great deal of transformation that really propels us forward societally. There's a great sense of progress with technology and society in general that comes through this transit. So, this I feel is being very potently reflected in collective consciousness as well as what's actually happening in the collective field right now. So I want to anchor this in with the idea that what we focus on becomes more real. Energy is our reality, right? So this is not about bypassing the pain, the shadows, the challenges. This is about really anchoring in the higher timeline so that we can fully collapse the distorted narratives and the lower timelines by fully embodying the higher one. So I will get into that from the perspective of my own cancer journey. So, I was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 30. If you are new to me or are not aware of that part of my history, and when I was diagnosed, no part of me would entertain the fear timeline. No part of me would entertain the possibility that I might not make it. I was confronted with a literal life and death situation at a fairly tender age, and I basically dove headfirst into what the darkness would hold for me. My family had a long history on my dad's side of the family of cancer. Seven of my family members had passed from cancer, cancer-related complications, treatment-related complications. So the odds from that perspective were not really in my favor. I had a massive growth the size of a grapefruit inside my chest, compressing my heart and my lungs, my vital organs. Not really in my favor. However, there were certain aspects that were in my favor, and one of those was absolutely my mindset and the fact that I was young and strong and otherwise healthy. I was a hot power yogi, lots of muscle mass at the time, super flexible. It was just like, how is this happening? So it got me deeper into the energetic layers. But what I did was I also looked at this stark reality of what I was facing with treatment. I teeter-tottered back and forth between doing it and not doing it, but because of the circumstances and I wasn't as aware of things that I am now at the time, but I was close to saying no, in spite of the fact that it was so big and my left lung was close to collapsing. I really just went into it head on because the actual odds for that particular protocol were in my favor, actually. So I looked at the side effects. I had a whole chemotherapy cocktail, and I looked at all the side effects. I looked at it head on. I looked at all of the different aspects of my family history, and I was like, okay, I am not going to perpetuate that paradigm. I'm going to shift the paradigm. I'm going to change the paradigm because I was told that was my job, was to heal the family pattern of dying from cancer and that it was not my time to die. So I clung on to that, not from a space of desperation, but from a space of deep knowing. There's no way I could prove that. I've had people argue that with me, but from this deep space of conviction that I would not allow that alternative timeline to be a possibility, to be my reality, that I would not make it. And so essentially, because I focused all of my attention and energy on the higher timeline of not just healing, but actually thriving. I imagine myself dancing happy, healed, healthy, and with all of that behind me at my sister's wedding, like pure celebration, pure joy energy. I would focus on that. I would visualize that while I was in the hospital getting my 100 hours of chemotherapy each round for 6 rounds. I focused on that timeline of being healed and having everything behind me. The old timeline just gone, just over. So I wasn't fighting the disease per se, but I chose to embody a new frequency. And that essentially collapsed that timeline. I had the mindset, but I was also, to be very clear, taking very proactive steps along the way to mitigate the side effects, to mitigate anything that might go wrong. I cleansed my body before I even started treatment. I was eating healthy, zero sugar, zero caffeine. I cut out all my favorite things. But it didn't feel like a sacrifice. It was a choice I made to choose higher, to heal my body. It was a choice made from a space of wholeness. It didn't feel restrictive. It felt expansive because of what possibility I was choosing by making those higher timeline choices. I was doing everything in my reality that I could, that I could get my hands on, that I came across, that was, within my realm of possibility. And I was doing energy healing on the side. And so to this day, don't know exactly what did what, but it was 88% gone after just 2 rounds. And my only regret is not putting my foot down with my doctor and saying I am done after 3 rounds, or getting that scan at least after three or even 4 rounds, one extra one for good measure. But mathematically speaking, it would have been gone after 3 rounds. But, hindsight is 2020 and I will never know. But what I did essentially was I anchored in that quantum shift through my energy being embodied in that higher timeline. And this is the power of co-creation in action. I wasn't bypassing and living in la la land. I was taking the action steps. I was using the power of my choice and sovereignty to make the choices and decisions that were aligned with my higher timeline. I would actually go back and make a couple different choices, but I also know that that was my path at the time, to go through the belly of the beast, as it were, to experience the distortions of the system, of the inversions, and how everything is upside down and backwards when it comes to actually healing. But in essence, the what point that I'm trying to make here is that it was by fully knowing the darkness that I was facing that enabled me to really take the necessary action steps to anchor in the timeline of life, the timeline of love, the timeline of being healed. So we are essentially experiencing now timeline wars. So, timeline wars from an energetic, spiritual sense. What does this actually look like in our reality? So, timelines are basically, are we going to get into war, or are we going to anchor in this heaven on earth reality, this golden age reality? So the lower timeline involves media manipulation, pure propaganda left and right that has been ramping up over the last however many years. But, going back, it's like now we have to question how much of our reality has been propaganda the whole time, and how much of it has just been siphoned more and more in that direction. Manufactured fear that is propagated through the politicians and the media. Manufactured consent as well for never-ending wars is part of this. And the divide and conquer tactics that we see everywhere in every realm through the social justice issues as well as politics, black and white narratives that leave no room for nuance, conversation, discussion, debate. What happened to political debate? That has gone by the wayside. It's my way or the highway, and the other side is the demon, right? And so this is how it looks being played out in real time, kind of constantly right now. But we see, if we're really paying attention, we see how a lot of these fear timelines have kind of collapsed. They really tried to push the COVID narrative hardcore over and over with, all the different new strains and the new versions of the boosters and things like that. And eventually people started to just opt out of the narrative, and they were like, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. And so that just kind of went by the wayside. And yeah, we could say that it was because it died out, but no, that's not how I see it. So there's also this ritual sacrifice that happens in a cyclical pattern. And this is very much a loose pattern. And what do I mean by ritual sacrifice? I mean the actual wars and catastrophes that are pretty regular and constant at this point. If it's not a natural disaster, it's a war. If it's not a war, it's a natural disaster or a shooting or something like that. Like just so much chaos and fear being pushed out into the collective consciousness right now. And I won't say every single thing. I won't be so absolutist, but somewhere in the realm of maybe 99% of it is orchestrated. Okay, I'm using a random number right now, but are there natural disasters? Yes, but how dramatic are they if nature is left to her own devices compared to what we see these days, right? So I came across a post as well that earlier today that said the most dangerous criminals wear suits. They don't run from the law, they write it. They don't destroy countries with bullets, they do it with pills. That is by Ali Zayteri. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, or Ali maybe. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I felt that really just hit the nail on the head with the point that I'm trying to make with this particular episode, which I had already planned out. And I happened to see that this morning. And the idea here is that this is a war that uses manipulation, pills, poison, and injections more so than bullets, and bombs. But we've been seeing that as well in our collective reality. So heavy, everything that we're dealing with. But there's also the weather warfare, right? The manipulation with chemtrails and the natural disasters created through double ARP. I don't even know what's being censored at this point and what isn't, but I'm just gonna have to go with it and flow with it for now. But this is the idea, is that the war is being waged on the level of consciousness through chemicals, through poison, through the medical system, which is very much not in alignment with true healing, which I learned firsthand going through the belly of the beast. And if you really want to get into it, excuse me, my treatment cost well over $500,000, with insurance bills that were sent to I thankfully had insurance and didn't have to pay it, but my treatment cost well over $500,000. And when you look at the way the industry works, I realize now that the reason my doctor wouldn't allow me to stop treatment early was because they would have lost out on maybe nearly half of that. So, this is the stark reality of our world and the way it operates. So, let's get into, though, the Middle East, because that has been such a huge part of what's going on in the collective recently, a huge point of uncertainty. So, the Middle East is actually a major Stargate zone. So, this is a war for the land and the energetic grids as much as it is for consciousness. And of course, we know that from the perspective of the Holy Lands, right? Israel being the Holy Land and all of that. But this is actually a lot deeper than just, people believing that their land belongs to their ancestors and so it's theirs and they should have the right to take it back or whatever. Like this is very much based in religious beliefs and God and all of that as well. So it's very spiritual. It's deeply spiritual and it's deeply energetic when you actually go deeper. So this is like it's just like it's wild. I don't mean to laugh about these things, but I think that's just a natural way I have of of lightening the conversation. I do this in sessions sometimes, and I have to say I apologize for laughing. This isn't a laughing matter whatsoever because we deal with some pretty dark stuff in the sessions. I think it's me naturally transmuting some of it, some of the heaviness, because it is heavy. But when we get into what's going on in Israel and Iran and all of that entire region, I mean, looking back over my entire lifetime, I feel there has been conflict in that region. So the Euphrates Tigris region is the birthplace of many wars, but it's also the birthplace of a lot of sacred knowledge and esoteric wisdom. So we have these ancient Sumerian and Mesopotamian overlays. And when you get back into, thousands of years ago, many millennia ago, the goddess culture was birthed in that region according to certain perspectives and traditions. At any rate, there is a deep tradition of goddess culture in that region. If you look at Ishtar and Inanna, which have been a little bit hijacked as well, but they represent the priestess path. They represent the goddess tradition of going deep into the underworld to be reborn and resurrected. Hint, hint, there's a little bit of a connection there, and it has been masculinized. But what happened was with the fall of goddess culture came the rise of the patriarchy. And there was a great deal of conflict in order to control the masses and the population. And so this is the hijacking of the sacred, not just of the sacred life force energy, but of sacred sites for war portals. So they basically took the energetic grids of the land and hijacked and distorted and corrupted them. Because there are many sacred sites and cathedrals built on particular nodes or intersections of the grid around the planet. Most sacred sites are on these very high energy ley lines or nodal points or intersections. So when we look at that region, Iran in particular has the 10D Stargate. The 10D Stargate is connected to the Sophia, the Sophianic consciousness, the divine feminine essence. And we look at what's happening in Iran now with the women in the population and how much suppression there has been there. And we can see that this can very clearly be going far beyond religious control. This is getting into the energetic grid. This is the control of consciousness. This is the control of humanity by controlling the wombs of the women and the consciousness of the women in particular. So we can also look at this from the perspective that everything is energy and magic is energy. So people used to be connected to the land itself and understand that it too holds energy. So war is a form of chaos magic that attempts to loosh off of humanity and the energetic codes in the land itself. So the attempt of war is to actually hijack, distort, and corrupt the energetic grids, the sacred codes held in the land, the energetic vortexes, the stargates. So when we look at it from that perspective, there's also powerful stargates in Giza and in the Holy Lands, Jerusalem and whatnot. So that whole region is a hotbed of chaos because of the potent energetics held in the land is a huge part of that. It's a huge, huge part of the reason for it anyway. So souls of harmony in contrast. So we could say that the warlords are souls of chaos, here to enact chaos, destruction, to be looshing off of humanity and the grids of consciousness of Gaia herself, the womb of Gaia, extracting from her womb and really distorting and hijacking her her nervous system. We can see the ley lines as her nervous system. Souls of Harmony, on the other hand, people who are probably more tuned to this channel, are here to restore by alchemizing and collapsing that timeline. So we are the transmuters, the light workers, the healers, whatever terminology. We are multidimensional humans, and we're actually going to be transcending a lot of that language as well, transcending the labels and whatnot. So, are we shrugging into collapse or awakening into the light now is the question. And it is a personal choice. It's a timeline choice. And I'm going to get now into how this connects a little bit with Atlas Shrugged as well. So I've been thinking a lot about this book, not just recently, although it's ramped up recently with the nomination. What's his name? I can't even remember his name. The New York City mayoral candidate. Do I have it written down in my notes here somewhere? I don't even know. Whatever his name is. He is a socialist. He is an outspoken socialist. And Ayn Rand is the opposite, okay? So she's actually a little bit of a controversial figure. She's been portrayed anyway as a controversial figure. She is the author of The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged and a few others, but she has an ideology of individualism that to me does read as a bit extreme, but also she is incredibly brilliant, and her novels were incredibly insightful and even prophetic. So for me, this is not a time to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I believe her books should be required reading for anyone before they graduate high school, aka reach voting age. That is a personal belief I hold. And this is not to say that I really affirm everything that she put out there, that I agree with everything that she says. But I believe that if we don't understand the consequences of certain political ideologies, if we don't really understand the upshot that comes with them, then we are not doing ourselves any favors. It's important to understand the opposite belief systems. It's important to understand alternative perspectives and viewpoints. It's important to understand particular ideologies from all realms of the perspective and spectrum, because this is how we repeat history, is if we don't learn from the past. She left Soviet Russia, I believe, or communist, was it Russia? I believe she was Russian. And I will say that I read this book more than one time. And when I got back to New York City from grad school in London in January 2013, I had this eerie sense. I was walking out of a cafe just south of Union Square, and I walked out and immediately had an eerie sense of, this feels like the beginning of Atlas Shrugged. It was a colder, gray day, and there was really nothing else that would lend itself to me having that sense, but I felt it to the core of my being that this was how it started. And then we saw Lord and Taylor shut down some years later, and I remember walking by the store just before it formally closed. They were selling off the last of the merchandise, and it was beyond eerie to see the half empty cases in the front. And in the vestibule between the two front doors, there were leaves blowing around. And I was like, oh my gosh, this feels like Atlas Shrugged as well. So, this is really how it begins. The beginning of the novel starts with the hollowing out of society and the slow degradation and destruction. There's a lack of, there's this like strong dissonance with what people were experiencing in their reality and what they felt was, true. And it's the sense of competence being stripped away. and being replaced with ideology itself. So there's a difference, a huge distinction between truth and ideology. So when we speak of socialism and all of these particular forms of governance, political structures, we've got to get very clear on what is ideology and what is bringing us closer to truth. I believe that most of the systems and structures that have existed until now are rooted in distortion. And so we've got to move beyond political ideology if we're going to create a more beautiful future. So, in Atlas Shrugged, for those who haven't read it, the world's creators, the innovators, the engineers, the CEOs, even the builders, they go on strike, essentially. And I'm not ruining the novel because this is from the beginning. But they really step away because their brilliance is being leached by the government in particular. It's the system that was demanding equal outcomes instead of earned excellence. And that's a huge distinction right now that we have to get clear on. But what happened when they basically stole from the rich to give to the poor? Well, first off, the government hoarded it. They didn't actually distribute it in a meaningful way that actually propelled society forward. So what actually happened is society collapsed. The infrastructure rotted, and nobody was left better off. In fact, it was basically depression. So communism has never worked. Socialism has never worked. Let's be real. Any models that look like they've worked, they're not true socialism or communism. And a lot of people still suffer under those systems. So, looking at the headlines in New York City, I mean, we literally have a mayoral candidate saying we need to seize the means of production and be unapologetic about our socialism. I mean, those lines feel straight out of Atlas Shrugged, particularly the former. Seize the means of production, straight out of Atlas Shrugged. It's eerie, but yet it's also kind of predictable based on what we've been seeing. They're going after the billionaires. Meanwhile, No King's Day was funded by billionaires. Make it make sense, right? But here is the twist. There is a silver lining. There is a golden reality that was anchored in the book as well. So there's Galt's Gulch. There is a hidden valley where the sovereign creators, the true stewards of beauty, of creation, of innovation, were all being taken to. I mean, it was a little bit extreme in the way that it happened. I don't see that exact reality playing out, a literal hidden gulch. Like, I don't think so. But they were unfettered. They were living off grid and in deep alignment with truth, literally creating a new civilization as the world around them collapsed, the world that they had helped to build. So, in our world right now, that is also very much what I see many of us doing, although albeit to a slightly different extreme. We're not running away per se, but we're opting out of the systems and structures to the best of our ability. But many people are literally doing it and going off grid. But we're choosing to create new systems rooted in integrity, in sovereignty, and spiritual truth above all. So this is not about escapism, it's about alignment. And we are here to build, to literally build, to create a new reality. And to do that, we really have to come together. None of us can do this on our own, obviously. That would be a task that is beyond any one of us. So when it comes to these timeline wars, again, this is so much about the spiritual and energetic aspect, not just our political reality. And so the choice is not really so much between collapse or survival, it's between the fear-based regression and soul-led creation. This is how I see it. And the regression timeline has us giving our power away to the government. You will own nothing and be happy kind of mentality. And this is what socialism brings in. And a lot of people, they do want that because they're struggling. They're speaking to the financial struggles that are a very real reality for so many people. And this is how he is gaining traction with his base. He is saying, we're going to take from the rich and give to you because we live in a very unbalanced, unequal society and it's not fair. To a degree, he's not wrong. There's a lot that is wrong with our system. This is how people get hooked in. But if you understand from a zoom out perspective how socialism and communism actually work and operate and how they never ever work, then nobody would support this. In their right mind, nobody would support this. So, are we going to keep fixing broken systems, or are we going to remember from the core of our being how to build a new earth? Because a lot of us do hold these templates and blueprints from ancient future timelines, civilizations that have passed that were true golden realities, golden age realities. So, if you feel like you're ready to shrug out that old world, you're not alone. We are doing this one by one, and that's the thing. It has to start within. We are lighting up the grid with truth, with love, with the higher timeline. So I will probably at some point do a deeper dive into the novel Atlas Shrugged because it does tie into ancient cycles like Atlantis and Babylon. And it's also about how we reclaim our power as grail architects of a golden age. But this is what we're doing. So to bring it back to this particular narrative of the New Earth timeline and the conscious collapse of the old timeline. So this is how we collapse the older timeline, is not by ignoring them, not by bypassing the reality that is occurring around us, but by becoming such a strong pillar of light, an anchor of truth, a frequency holder of the true template that the false one simply cannot exist around us any longer. So when we do this work on an individual level, we become a frequency match for only things that are aligned for us, and the rest will fall away. And so this is what's happening on a collective level, slowly but surely. And from a grander sense, it's actually happening quite rapidly. But by becoming the pillar of light and focusing on the timeline of love, this is not a bypass, nor is it a contradiction of saying, we've got to confront the shadows, but be a pillar of light. It's both and. By becoming the pillar of light, we actually have to go through, or sorry, in order to become the pillar of light, we actually have to go through, navigate the shadows, confront the shadows head on, confront the evil within our reality, confront even the possibility for evil within us. I have spoken into this in a couple different episodes through different lenses, but this is the work of our time, is the true integration, which then lends to integrity. Unfortunately, in the realm of spirituality, in the spiritual world, there are a lot of people operating out of integrity. They leave the corporate world because they went to a Joe Dispenza retreat and then try to implement the same structures into the spiritual world. And it just doesn't really work that way. Like, a lot of people haven't gone through the true initiations that it takes to really humble your ego and integrate your soul into your body. This is about actual literal embodiment of your soul to really heal the light body and activate the divine template within. So if we want to see peace and harmony in the world, we have to become a living embodiment of that frequency. As within, so without. This is the work. This is a form of mastery when rooted in full awareness. This is the key to collapsing the lower timelines, is being able to face the reality, the darker, evil reality, however you want to call it, the shadows of our world, by facing them head on, but choosing to be that pillar of light. This is how we collapse the darker timelines. So this means doing the shadow work, doing the trauma integration and healing, integrating the emotional wounds. This is what it means to become a vessel, is by actually walking the walk. This is what is required to hold the frequency of divinity. So if we want to anchor in a golden age of light, this is an ancient memory that is coming from the core of our being. So many of us are remembering these realities and this truth, this timeline that is a possibility, and anchoring in this future now prophecy through our bodies. So, if you are here resonating with this, you're probably part of the group of souls that is anchoring in this higher timeline, this higher reality. So, some tools that we can use and some signs that you're on a higher timeline or shifting into it, I'll kind of cap off with this is, time is going to be feeling different probably for most of us, but if you're feeling these kind of tweaks in time, you're probably anchoring in or shifting into this higher timeline. You also feel more of a sense of calm in the chaos. Your nervous system is regulated. It's not hijacked by these narratives. You're responding, not reacting from a place of trigger. When people come at you or when things come out in our reality. A lot of people have TDS, not just in America, and every headline they see, they latch onto it and it's like, bah, 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 projecting all sorts of stuff out into the reality, right? And it's just creating more division, more chaos. But if you can just witness and not get reactive, you can respond. But if you're not reactive, that's a sign that you have, really begun to anchor this in. You don't need to be right or over explain because you just know there is a higher truth and that you're in alignment with it. Not that we have totally figured everything out and, higher truth with a capital T is completely anchored in, but there is a higher truth compared to this other truth, perhaps, You can tell when people are operating through distortion. And there's also this sense that authenticity and integrity are everything, and you cannot compromise when it comes to that. There is zero tolerance, literally in your physical vessel, for misalignment. That tolerance is just non-existent. You literally, physically will reject anything that is not aligned, whether that is food or people. But ways to actually ground this in through practices and mindset shifts include daily frequency attunement, discernment, and, not from a space of paranoia, but actually really tuning in. Does this thing that even perhaps my former mentor is sharing now, does this resonate with me? Sovereignty over reactivity is also really, really important. Coming into your center, into your core, and responding, not reacting. So really cultivating that sense of sovereignty and taking your inner authority back within. So this is solar plexus work as well. So anchoring through joy and creation and soul-aligned service. So when it comes to the new reality, we're operating from a sense of service, and that doesn't mean servitude. There's a big difference there. It doesn't mean you don't get paid for your service, but you are serving from a space of love and an overflowing cup. And this is how we actually begin to shift the reality. And a huge part of this is also embracing the unknown, because this is where most of the growth occurs. That is the dark night of the soul, right? Is really entering the unknown. And some of us are kind of forced into it, like I was with a cancer diagnosis, but we can, get to that point of consciously choosing to leave the past behind. And there are many deaths and rebirths and dark nights of the soul that many of us go through. It is not a one and done process for the most part. They're not all necessarily long and lengthy, but within one dark night of the soul, it can feel like perhaps many deaths and rebirths or whatever. But I feel that the most rebellious thing that we can do right now is to live life fully, authentically, and full of joy, to really choose love and to love deeply as best as we can, and to really embody our highest timeline. So by choosing love and by choosing joy, we become the stargate, we become the portal of love to anchor that into the earth, to anchor that into the collective consciousness. So I invite you, if this is resonating with you, to reflect on the timeline that you're contributing to. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect. We all fall from grace in little ways or big ways sometimes, but to really be conscious of that and to collapse like your own loops, your own lower timelines, to really start to choose the higher timelines and to collapse any part of yourself that is still operating in them, and to really step into your role as a beacon of light, as an anchor of truth, as a timeline architect, builder of the new reality, even in any way, shape, or form that you feel is in alignment for you. It doesn't mean that you literally have to pick up a hammer and whatever and start building something. That's not what I mean by architect or designing a literal blueprint. That's not what I mean by architect of the new reality. I mean the frequency of it more so than anything. And that includes art, that includes soul service, that includes living in a frequency of joy and enjoying your daily life to the best of your ability. So it doesn't have to be grandiose, right? So, if this is resonating with you, I also invite you to join me for the Defense Against the Dark Arts Masterclass that I will be hosting. It's going to be a two-part masterclass because there's a lot to go through. I've had some requests for this, and I am excited to bring this out because it's so important right now. This is part of the timeline wars, is kind of creating Dumbledore's army, right? But this is energetic, it's frequency. We don't need wands to enact the magic. We are the magic, but we have to actually have the tools to know how to work with the frequencies. So we're going to anchor in with clearing, how to clear our field and stuff like that, but also going deeper into, and yes, the protection and all of that. I'm going to be sharing a bunch of different tools so your toolkit is really strong. So we're going to be doing that, and it will start in the first one will be the end of July. So I will link that, the wait list at least. I don't know if I'll have the website, the page fully ready to go by the time I post this. Probably not, honestly, but at least get your name on the wait list, and I should have that ready pretty shortly. And also one-on-one sessions, if you're ready to not just clear your field, but close the karmic loops by really getting to the root. I do crystal and womb healing sessions. Those are so potent and powerful, as well as karmic integration and your own timeline clearing, your own personal timeline clearing, to really anchor in and restore your light body, to anchor in the higher timeline and restore your light body, and then soul blueprint activations. So I have that page pretty close to being ready. It's got all the information on it. So I will have that one linked. And then I will be hosting another free live masterclass to embody your soul's blueprint coming shortly. So you can get your name on the list for that as well. And yes, there's a lot more coming down the road. I am so excited to share all the updates because this is all part of my school that I've been building. And you can pre-register for Luminary. It's basically Hogwarts in real life, but very practical, learning tools of energetic mastery. And there's already the foundational blueprint to step into your own level of embodiment. So pillar one is really the full transformational journey, 12 modules built off the science of transformation. And I include nervous system regulation, as well as, really connecting with heart coherence and anchoring in the diamond frequencies and stuff. But also the basics of the nitty-gritty basics of mindset and are you eating right for your body? Are you moving properly? Are you hydrating properly? So getting those foundations really anchored in is honestly so important. So I so appreciate you all for being here on this journey with me as we journey home to the heart of truth. Thank you so much for being here. I so look forward to sharing more episodes. There's just so much that wants to be shared, including other interviews. But yeah, it's just non-stop. So thank you for being here. So appreciate the likes, subscribes, comments, the follows on the podcast. And yes, I so look forward to hearing how this one is landing for you. Onward and upward, we got this. Thank you for tuning in to the Heart of Truth podcast with your host, Amanda Erin Kelly. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating or review on your favorite platform. And if you'd like to go deeper, grab your copy of my book, Let There Be Light, and join us inside the free community in Illumina Wisdom School, where you can access free resources to jumpstart your journey, such as a higher self activation and the Body Temple Blueprint Masterclass, as well as explore the plethora of resources, including Awakening Fundamentals and Luminary, my signature path to wholeness and mastery, to help you become your own healer and sovereign authority. You can access everything at thisartcalledlife.com or find the links down in the show notes below. Until next time, onward and upward in love and light as we journey home to the heart of truth.